All right, so we're at Genesis 1. We're looking at life and how it maybe was created out of nothing, or maybe evolved over millions of years. We're seeing the creation account in Genesis chapter 1 seems to best fit, most plausible, what we see today and what we can examine from what we can observe scientifically today. We're looking at Genesis chapter 1, so it's genesis1.htm. Here's the address. And we'll look for God was forming specific specimens of additional animals and birds on day 6 when he created man, for man to name them, every beast of the field and every fowl of the heavens. Genesis chapter 2:19, to present them before Adam to name while he was in the Garden of Eden. And the man caused names to all the cattle and to fowl of the heavens and to every beast of the field. This was done so that Adam would determine by this that he did not have a helper as his counterpart, a creature that was literally one corresponding to him in the sense of being his equal, and in another sense one with which he could be fruitful and multiply, as the animals and birds each had one corresponding to them, male and female. The creation of these additional animals, then I must emphasize, and birds, does not contradict the account in chapter 1, because chapter 2 has day number 6 in view, which is before God had ceased creating and rested from this activity. Furthermore, there is nothing in the Genesis 1 account that indicates that God was through creating animals and birds until day 7. Many contend this differently. Now you can click on this and get more details of it when you look at Genesis chapter 2. So God, Jehovah God, brings each of the just formed birds and animals unto the man to see what he calls it. And whatever the man calls a living creature, that is its name. And as Adam calls names to all the cattle, and to all the fowl of the heavens, and to every beast of the field, that Jehovah God formed and brought before Adam, it becomes evident to Adam that he has not found a helper, one who is his counterpart. This implies that Adam was looking for his counterpart amongst all the animals and birds that Jehovah God was forming for Adam to name. It also implies that Adam had an incredible mentality to observe and name so quickly so many animals and birds. Adam's naming of the animals was also an indicator that he was taking dominion over them. All categories of land animals, therefore, were created simultaneously. No evolution, only creation. The land animals made during the early part of the 6th day are categorized as cattle, creeping things, and beasts of the earth. This description is evidently intended to be comprehensive insofar as land animals are concerned. Very likely, the term cattle refers to domesticating able animals, beasts of the field. It's a little hard with my mouth today. Refers to large, wild animals, and creeping things refers to all animals that crawl or creep close to the surface of the ground. This classification has no correlation with the arbitrary system of man-made taxonomy, amphibians, reptiles, mammals, insects, etc., but it is a more natural system based on the relation of the animals to man's interests. Thus, the term beasts of the earth includes the large mammals such as lions and elephants, and probably also the large extinct reptiles known as dinosaurs. Creeping things includes the insects and the smaller reptiles, and probably almost most amphibians and many small mammals, moles, rats, and so on. We have Leviticus 11:29-31. All 3 categories of land animals were made simultaneously, as it is evident from the inverted order of listing in verses 24-25. Once again, it is obvious that there is not the slightest correlation with the imaginary evolutionary order, that is, insects, then amphibians, then reptiles, and all mammals. As a matter of fact, evolution places insects, amphibians, and land reptiles all before the birds that Genesis says were made the day before. There was no evolutionary struggle for existence among these animals either, for God saw that it was good. Neither could one evolve into a different kind, because God made each category after his kind. All these land animals were said to have been brought forth from the earth or ground. That is, their bodies were composed of the same elements as the earth, and when they died, they would go back to the earth. They also had souls, all of them. because they were said to be living creatures. There's nephesh, one particular use of that word. In this respect, they were like air and water, animals, and also like man. So, the world was now fully prepared for the creation of man on day 6. The world was now fully prepared for its human inhabitants who would be given dominion over it. God did not need 5 billion years to prepare for man, as theistic evolutionists seem to think. In fact, he did not even need the 6 days that he took. The reason for taking 6 days apparently were, first, to stress the orderly and logical relationships between the different components of the creation, and second, to provide a divine pattern for man's 6-day work week. So when God says he created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, and the 7th day you shall rest, it doesn't mean 6 billion year days, and then the 7th day man should rest for 1 billion years. Well, doesn't make sense. 24-hour days. A regular day of rest and special fellowship with God would be essential for man's good, and God's example would be the best pattern and incentive for man to keep such a day. Actually, the formation of the land animals must have taken only a small portion of the 6th day. The 2nd chapter of Genesis describes in fuller detail the rest of the events of the 6th day, events which are only briefly outlined here in the 1st chapter. So we have Genesis 1:26-27. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created, out of nothing, Hebrew verb, bara, man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. Now in Genesis chapter 2, it breaks it down into a little bit more detail, but it's the same time period. It's like a movie. There's a panoramic scene in Genesis chapter 1, and then God pans in on the 6th day when he created man in the particular area, Garden of Eden, and goes into detail there. And it continues to create some of the animals and beasts and fowl of the air, continues to create them for man to name, for Adam to name. And Eve hadn't yet been created. That's panning in on it. So let us make man in our image in Genesis 1:26-27. God is made up of more than one personality, hence the plural forms in let us make man in our image, not angelic beings. Angelic beings didn't create any life. It is God that created life, but it's plural. Let's see why. Then God said, "Let us make man in our image according to our likeness." God is Elohim there, and it's plural. Said, it's a singular verb. So a singular verb, refers to a singular entity, yet God is plural. Us is plural too. And make, singular verb in the Hebrew, to make. And our, again, is plural. Let's understand this. In our image according to our likeness. Our image, the construction here of a plural subject followed by a singular verb, indicates one God with more than one personality. We call that the Trinity. The words the Trinity aren't there in the Scripture because that's an English word, but it refers in construct, in context, to a single one God with an expression, personality, if you will, of more than one, 3 personalities. So in order to avoid attributing God with more than one personality, objectors to the Trinity state that the phrase "in our image" in Genesis 1:26 refers to God and the angels who are deciding together to create man in their image. This would then infer that angels have the image of God on an equal basis with the Almighty Eternal God and thus contributed in creation. That's not going to be true. Let us make with him as creators. However, the image that the passage is referring to is a unique one to God, and him alone, and God alone is implied by the word our. If us is to include angels, then a plural verb form of make instead of singular would have been inspired by God to be used, but it was singular verbs. And God's image is an eternal image, which angels and man are made into only in a finite way. If equality were meant instead of similarity, then the verse should have been worded, "Let us make man equal with us," and not let us make man in our image according to our likeness. So much for the evolutionist and atheist point of view. Man, in the sense of mankind, male and female, is created in God's image. So in our image, salam is imaged, is used in a special sense here, since God, being infinite in spirit, is not limited to a finite human form. Therefore, a human being created in the image of God means that each individual human being possesses in a finite way certain qualities which God possesses, such as consciousness of himself, the ability to love, worship, think, perform, etc., creatively like no other living creature on earth. But God possesses those in an infinite way. And the word make, the significant interchange between the words bara, create, and asa, make, is of great interest. The word bara carries the thought of the initiation of the object involved from nothing, evidently relative to the soul and spirit of each human being, man and woman. It always connotes what other people can do and frequently emphasizes the absolute newness of the object created. The word asa is much broader in scope, connoting primarily the fashioning of the object from existing material with little concern for special nuances. It's all about context and the available meaning of words. You can't make up a new meaning of the words in your own mind. You have to use the words that we see available in dictionaries that reflect how words are used, and how you would like to use them. The use of bara, created out of nothing, in the opening statement of the account of creation in Genesis chapter 1 seems to carry the implication that the physical phenomena came into existence at that time and had no previous existence in the form in which they were created by divine fiat. The use of asa may simply connote the act of fashioning the objects which had already been created out of nothing. Now, later in the book of Genesis in chapter 2, we have the creation of the woman. God used the side of Adam, not the rib necessarily, the side of Adam, which he took from Adam to make the woman. The word made in Genesis 2:22, made he a woman, is the Hebrew word translated as banah. It means to build or to construct from existing materials, as opposed to the Hebrew word bara, which means to create out of nothing. The physical bodies of the man and the woman were made out of something that previously already existed. Adam's body was made, yatsar, formed from the earth material which God previously had created, had previously bara, created out of nothing by his spoken word. So God did not bara, create out of nothing the body of Adam, rather he formed it out of the dust of the earth. And it says that. Now, but what he did create out of nothing was man's, in the sense of man's and woman's soul and spirit, implying that mankind's spirit and soul are not inheritances from descendants. For in Genesis 1:21 it states, so God created, bara, created out of nothing, man in his own image. In the image of God he created him, male and female he created them. And in Genesis 2:7 it states, and Jehovah God forms, yatsar, the man from dust from the earth, and breathes into his nostrils the breath of lives, plural, Hebrew hayim, masculine plural, 2 lives in one living being existing together, man's soul and his human spirit, and the man becomes a living creature. We have that living spirit in us now from nothing. It's not inherited from our ancestors, descendants, mothers and fathers. So God formed the body from the elements and compounds already made, described as dust of the ground, and then breathed into the body man's essence, his soul and spirit, which were created out of nothing. Hence man and woman, alone of the creatures God created on earth, has 2 lives. A physical, mortal life and a spiritual, immortal life, which lives on after physical death. This was an act of creation of never before existing entities, the unique soul and spirit of man in the image of God. Man was made in God's image, in the dictionary, word book of the Old Testament. The likeness to mute, which is then explained as his having dominion over God's creation as vice-regent. We have Genesis, Psalms 8:5-8. Read that. and we'll see you next time.